It's about time to get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. Today's presentation is a very, very important one. We're going to learn about mind, body, and spirit from LaBarbara Wigfall, and I'm very excited to have her be our presenter today. LB, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right, then the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I like to start with something quieting, something soothing. I hope that you had a moment to take a breath on a third day of the new semester and are ready for what I'm going to say. And I will tell you right now that I am not a scientist. I don't know a lot about biology, so I'm not going to dig deep into this subject, but I do want to make sure that we all understand what the mind, body, and spirit do for us, because that's really important. So I'm going to start by saying, first of all, that I've been teaching about 43 years. I've been teaching 33 years at K-State. So I don't profess to know everything. No teacher does. But I have, through some experiences, picked up some things, and I'm going to be very vulnerable in telling you some of my frailties as well, so that you know that these things don't always come very easily. But I will tell you that time flies when you're having fun. So that is a way to think about it. So how did I come to this philosophy? And I will tell you that when I first started teaching right out of graduate school, and I teach architecture and planning courses, urban design classes I've taught in a number of universities. But for me, I knew my material. You know, the things that you're taught, you know those things. You feel very confident. The issue is, do you know how to transfer that information to someone else? And usually it's those who are in education that feel more comfortable being able to do that. So for me as a teacher, it was about pour that into the brain, pour that into the brain. That's my job, is to make sure that my students know what I know. So that was perhaps the beginning of a search for what I call mind, body, spirit. And what I've been able to do most recently, and in fact, on Monday, the beginning of class, was to say some of these things that I'm going to tell you to my students. And I start every first day of the class with some of this conversation. So let's get into it right away. The mind, it governs our mental and emotional selves. It also means that we have students that come to us that may not have a healthy mind, first of all. And we're going to get into that a little later. But the point is, it exercises with stress kept at a bay if we have a healthy mind. But we know that stress right now with COVID and all the issues that students may come to the university with, and I deal with freshmen in particular. So they're trying to learn what their habits are, who they are away from home. All of those things become challenges for them. So the idea is that and positive thoughts, feelings of joy are present. Thirst of knowledge and learning is part of that. So the brain also needs to sleep. The brain needs to sleep. And we're going to get to that part of it a little bit later. But I want to keep going on. The mind sort of has a way of getting its signals, communication from the body. From the body. The body gives symptoms. So when we're stressed or we're aggravated, our body may feel a pain, ache or two. As you get older, it happens anyway. But you're trying to figure out, okay, where is that coming from? So the idea is that a healthy body may be free of disease and illness. And we know right now, as we're dealing with COVID, that we'll have students who do get ill. Flu is upon us, flu season is on us. So we may have people who have either neglected their body, not treated it healthy with the right diet, exercise, nutrition, movement, and sleep. Those are things that help us build strength in the body. And also those regular checkups with a primary care doctor. So those are all things that help us have a healthy body. Spirit. Spirit is a really difficult one to touch on because we are a university that is a public institution. And for Christians, we may think of it as the Holy Spirit, and we're cautious about talking about particular affinity for God. So I look at it a little different because I'm not trying to affect my students in a way that is not their choice. But to say that, to me, it's that unique entity that expresses creative doings, dealings. So the creative expression comes from the spirit, whereas the spirit is this silent witness or observer guiding us through life. So when I talk about spirit, sometimes I just talk about the K-State spirit, the fact that we have this family of us that exhibit the spirit of our school. And also, to me, one of the most important pieces, the last two sentences down here, that we understand that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And I think students sometimes, when they come to school, it's about them. They're not yet ready to be part of our K-State community or understand what their place is in the community. And so a healthy spirit includes being part of a community to share with others without expecting anything tangible in return. So most of our students, and I don't blame them, they expect of us some return on their family's investment. I'm not talking about that kind of return, but that they start to understand their unique selves in this body, this community called our campus, and make their way. And the spirit is what's going to help them. I find that when students are not passionate about learning, that they can have trouble digesting the information that we try to share with them. And that is the spirit that's the problem. And how do they change? We call it attitude. Sometimes we say that they don't have a professional attitude or they have a negative attitude. Why are they here with us? And how do you turn that around? So we're going to talk about that as well. So the question is not that these are separate entities, they are connected to one another. What does it truly mean to be about mind, body, spirit as faculty? So I know that we all can think of those days where we want to just pull our hair out. We come home and we're stressed to the max. And we decide that there's some mental or emotional struggle that could be manifested then in a physical way. Stress does that. And when we look at these, the words that are here, I'm going to call out some of them that are specific to stress. Heart racing, sweat more than usual, fatigue, restlessness or restless. Now, diet, sleep, and lethargic. But diet, sleep, and healthcare can work to our advantage. So if we look at it a different way, diet, sleep, and healthcare can be a positive thing. How we handle our diet, what are we eating? What are we ingesting? How much sleep are we getting? How are we handling our healthcare? If we're sick, did we go to Levine, for instance, or do we, as faculty, go to the doctor, or do we tell our children, please let us know that you're not feeling well? Not an excuse, but to give us that feedback. And then balance is what we want. We want to know that the mind is at peace because you're not so conflicted, and physically you're relaxed, ready to take on the whole world or whatever comes your way. And that these components then exhibit strength, endurance, and flexibility. And our students, obviously, to get through 4 or 5 years or graduate school PhD programs, need to have these attributes. So we want to be happier, kinder, grateful people. And how we approach our students and model that is important. So let's talk about understanding this connection, practicing a holistic approach. Mind, body, spirit, that's you. That's you. We don't separate out your mind or your brain from your body or from your spirit. And that's me. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of things that have to do with my own personal experience. Having taught a long time, and I've never actually taken a sabbatical in that amount of time, you get tired. You just can't help that. There's points when the stress is one that you may not be able to manage at some point. In my case, I lost both of my parents. I'm an only child. I lost them both within a 3-year period. So of course, I'm Superwoman. I want to believe that I can handle that grief, that I can handle it, and I don't have it affect my classwork. It doesn't affect my job. Well, who am I kidding? It started to affect my productivity. And that wasn't all of it. There's other things that happen. I have to manage 2 homes, one here and one in Washington, D.C. And all of that played a part in whether I felt or didn't feel anxiety. Well, the way in which my anxiety exhibited itself was my blood pressure went up. There's the body telling the mind what's going on. There's a real issue here and you need to take care of it. With intervention, I have done that. I am far more productive now, but we have students who fit into the same category. When we load them up with work and we're not looking at the pacing because we're so concerned with the content that we have to or feel we have to get across to them, because that's our job. That's the teachers and us. We also need to be thinking about how that affects them. And how do we measure that? How do we observe that in our classes? Sometime, and I know some of you have large classes where that may not be as readily obvious to you. It may be an after hour or office hour time that you spend with them. I teach classes that are 16 to 18 students, seminars. And so it's easier for me perhaps to notice the students that may be struggling, but it's important to be there for them, realizing you're not a counselor. So I'm not trying to take the place of a professional counselor. But if I can begin to help the student, maybe I can help them navigate through the class. And I may also suggest that they see someone professional to talk with. But it is important, I think, for the student to know that you see them holistically. You just don't see them as a head that you're pouring information in. And I think that's really important. So we're going to talk about some of the things that I do: nurture and sharpen the mind. So it says, you are the books you read, the movies you watch, the music you listen, the people you spend time with, the conversations you engage in. Choose wisely what you feed your mind. And we don't think to talk to our students about any of these things. When I talk to my students, I ask them, what book have you read lately? We have a book network that our students have as freshmen. Do you talk about those books, whether they've read them? Maybe some of them really love romance novels. You want to encourage them to work the brain and then use the information that comes through the brain for critical thinking, which is the mind side of what we're talking about. So I'm always sort of looking at that aspect of my students, not just what I'm imparting. So here's some examples, and I want you to think about them and respond if you feel comfortable. So what's your favorite brain workout? And here are some. How many of you use crossword puzzles, board games, puzzles with your family to work the brain? Just, you can do it by participants on the bottom, or you can raise your hand, or however you wish to acknowledge that you do that. How many of you do that? And then, do you use those same mechanisms in your classroom? Because I think that's important too, not just at home, but to consider how you can use a puzzle or a game to do your exam or a quiz, to make it fun, to make it digestible, to make them have to use their brain, and also work in teams, which is another thing that you're going to see a little later. Do some of you love to read, sew, garden, learn a foreign language? That's another way that you or your students or your children can grow in their brain power. And we know that these different aspects help improve our memory, and that's important. So, exercising the mind and the body, we've already shown they're connected. So, when we exercise, believe it or not, we're not just using the body, we are also using our mind. Sometimes we're thinking about what we're going to teach the next day if we're on the treadmill, but we can also focus on what's happening to our body at that moment rather than to fill us with the things of work. So there's other ways that we can use our exercise time to improve our productivity. And the more senses that are involved, the better the memory power. So if you can have your students stand up, sit down, do other active things in the classroom while you're also working their mind, they're going to have more memory there. Their memory power is going to get associated with the action that you asked them to do. This is really important, I think, with history classes, for classes where they're asked to remember large amounts of information, to use that as a connection. I've separated these last three for a reason because they're really important to me. So, do any task with full focus. Focus can sometimes be my problem. I'm one of those people who likes to get up and go do something and come back and do something and come back and do something. I'm not one who sits very long, but I will tell you that yesterday while I was working on this, I didn't have my TV on the whole day. I listened to the music that I played for you at the beginning of this session, and my focus was much better. And just like our students need to learn what works best for them so that they become good habits that they carry through the 4 or 5 years or the 3 years or 4 years of graduate school. So helping them study habit is not just learn the material, it's learning about themselves and what works best for them, and not have them look to the right or left at somebody else, because they're unique beings. And I want them to know that I see them as individual people in my room. So keep things organized. Another one, that I can go into a faculty office and see piles of paper up on the desk and see piles of paper on the floor in my office at home. And organization is sometimes very difficult to do. It actually becomes a brain workout when you know what's in those piles and you can go to it right away. But most of us may have to search a little bit. So the point is to stay organized, because when we're organized in our surroundings, our head is organized, our brain, our mind is better able to be efficient. And then keep quiet in your mind. And I put discipline behind that one because that's one my mother taught me. She used to say to me, "How many times do you sit still without the TV on?" And I'm like, "Well, I play music." I used to give her a reason. She's like, "No, no, no, that's not what I mean. How many times do you sit in silence and just breathe? Just let the day go by, not thinking so much about what you taught or what you're going to teach tomorrow or the worries of the day. Just clear out the mind." If you're a parent, that may be difficult to do. I bet you look for those moments that you can have by yourself somewhere in your home. But if we talk about brain or mind healthy, it's important that you get those quiet, isolated times. Sometimes we get it if we go for a nice walk on a trail by ourselves. But it is important to renew the mind as well as faculty. To go on, let me see here. I'll go this way. The next one is body. Body. Fuel and energize the body. And I know I thought this was kind of a cute icon to think about it. And of course, this one's really promoting vegetables. But it's important to fuel the body. And this is an area that I have a conversation with my students as well. I talk to them about what they're eating. I'll ask them, how many of you eat, junk food? How many of you go to Aggieville and get, have a couple of drinks? Those kinds of things become just as important in trying to help them know what's best for their production and to see them as human beings where you're really concerned about them in other ways other than the mind and the brain. And sometimes this is really easy as just an icebreaker. I'll say, what'd you have for breakfast this morning when I'm waiting for everybody to come on Zoom? We just have a little conversation about our health. How are you feeling? Ask them how they're doing and give them a moment to tell you how they're doing. And so fueling the body is important because perhaps they don't know where Lafine is. They don't know the procedure if they're freshmen of what to do and how to do it. So I try to do that. But I also talk because I'm a big vegetarian, sort of less meat person. I tell them about good habits that they need to form. So here's the thing that I'll do. I'll say, not to tell them, but ask them to respond to these practices. So how many of you work out at the rec center? I asked it on Monday. About 6 or 7 of my students did. I said, great, that's good that you do. What do you do at the rec? So we have a little conversation about that. They can feel good that they're doing something that helps them stay fit. And then I will, and here's my experience. I used to go to the rec for a 6 o'clock Zoom class, and I'll tell them, well, I'd have to be back by 7:30 because my class is at 8:30. So now I do that in the evening. I walk so that they know I'm part of the human race too. I'm doing the same things that I'm asking them to do. I'm giving them options, places that they could go, things that they could do. I also ask them, how much sleep do you get? Because, our college, our architecture and planning and design is so-called notorious for whether our students get a lot of sleep. No, they do get a lot of sleep. But when you have freshmen, you have to make them aware that they should get a good amount of sleep because sleep, we already found out from understanding mind, body, and spirit, sleep affects your productivity and it affects your mind. So I'm constantly saying, well, how much sleep did you have last night? Because when you look at their work, sometimes you can tell they worked all night, but they didn't produce anything good. And so you're wanting them to be aware of some ways that they might improve their sleep pattern. So Monday, I said to my student, what do you think is a typical nap time? And a couple of them said 15 minutes, I'll get like a quick nap for 20 minutes. And I went, no, 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 no. And I didn't quite say it that way. But what I did say to them is that there is something called RAS and REM. Does anybody know what the RAS is in the brain? Somebody can tell me what it is, of those of you who are on with us today? Anybody want to speak up? Well, I'll tell you. The RAS is a complicated term. It's abbreviation for reticular activating systems. And what that does, it's like the attention center in the brain. It is the one place that controls and programs the exact messages that come to us and that we send to our conscious mind. For example, you can set goals through the RAS, affirming or visualizing your goals. So knowing something about RAS can help you explain to your students why they want to get sleep, because RAS needs to rest in order for them to be productive. But the other thing I talk about is REM. REM sleep is that deep sleep that you get. And most doctors will say it's about an hour and a half. But I told my students it could be an hour and 45 minutes, an hour and 15. Each one of you has your own cycle. And one of the things you're doing as a freshman is understanding yourself. So maybe yours is an hour. But if you take a 15-minute nap, you'll only temporarily be refreshed. So you notice that after maybe a half hour, you're feeling just as bummed out as you did before you took the nap. So maybe you want to try that. And my students have found that to be useful. They've tried it. Some of them go around and say, have you had your RIM for the day? And so they've found quick and easy ways to talk about their health. And that's important. So if you look at the list over here, and you probably have while I was talking, there's several of these things that matter to each one of us. Getting that vitamin D and sunshine, limiting coffee, uh, getting that power nap in, maybe taking vitamins, getting exercise outside, and reducing our smoking and our drinking, but getting plenty of water. And those are things as faculty we can demonstrate when there's no COVID and we can take our mask off and show that we're taking good care of ourselves. So let's move on. Nourish and share the spirit. I love this image of this man dancing. I'm sure that we have all danced around our home because we're happy about something that we've done either last week, today, something wonderful that happens. And I think that's sort of a representation of what the spirit is like, that you want to share your passion with your students. I found when I walk in the room, if I'm excited about something and they can see that, then it's contagious. They start to then practice being excited about it too. They see that their teacher is just not there for the job, that I'm really interested and excited about what they're going to do for the day, and they respond in kind. One of the things I saw just this past week from the Ad Council, and it seemed like a pretty good piece of advice. It was centered on families, but it seemed like we could use it in our classrooms as well. For each criticism, offer praise and support. And Ad Council said, every time you say something negative or punish or whatever it is you do to admonish your child, make sure 3 times after that you say something positive. So there's kind of a 3-to-1 ratio on how we support our students as well, that everything isn't negative, nor is everything positive. But giving them positive messages, I think is very important. When they've done something, maybe they didn't do it all right, but they did something that you could admit or say to them, hey, that's really good, but you could move this a little further if you spend a little bit more time, or let me help you with fleshing out the rest of your idea or what have you. One of the things that I do in my studio is that my student work is always very different. Each student's projects are different. There is not, other than the requirements, what you see is a different approach from each one of them. And I do that so that they see how they can take their idea and take it further. I would not want to see all of their projects look alike. And so I say to them, well, what are you trying to do? Let's tell me what you're trying to do, and let me see if I can help you get there. Can I translate that to what it is that you want to do as a solution? And I try to give them that leeway to be creative, because I think that we forget, and our students perhaps in high school didn't have that opportunity. They may need a little coaxing to be creative. I remember when I was a kid, when I was a little one in secondary school, in Washington, D.C., in the public school system, we had art and we had other ways of allowing students to sort of explore. And our kids today don't necessarily, in all the schools that they're in, have that opportunity. So you might have to work with them a little bit to get them to realize that they have a good idea too. And it may need flushing because they're young, but as they grow in the profession, they will learn how to flush that out and critically evaluate that and move forward. So we are creative beings. let us flourish. This is a line that I use with just about everyone. I say again that we sort of forget that there's another part of our brain that is uniquely us. And in my mind, we are all creative. Some of us tap into that, some of us don't. We live in houses where if I walked into your house, it would look different than mine. And someone else's house may look different from yours. So there is that uniqueness. We dress a certain way that we think represents who we are. Our students do as well. And trying to tap into how they are different and unique is really acknowledging them. And sometimes it's something simple, like I'll say to one of my students online, I'll say, hey, I see you've got on this interesting top today, or this, this hat. You got this weird hat you're wearing. Or if their pictures are up, I'll have a student who'll change their photo every week. And I'll acknowledge that. Oh, you changed it from last week. Just something simple to say, I see you. I see your creativity. I see how you want to share with me who you are. So we can not only take that passion and make it contagious, but if we flourish in our creativity, it will also manage through our courses and through those we come in contact, because for it replenishes the sense of hope and trust. So every person feels good when he senses that he is being trusted, given responsibility to do something equal to his ability, and held accountable for his actions. Everyone is that way. So if we can, at least tell our students how we give them some latitude, and then let them work to their capacity and help them along the way, and then come back and say, you are accountable to these boundaries that we've set on your project. They're challenged. And that's where the creativity can come from, that there are boundaries on the things that we're asking them to do. So here's where you come in. This is a breakout, and I think we're just about, are we, Tucker, just about ready to launch that? I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute here. And I am going to set up my breakout rooms. We have how many participants? I'm looking, 36. So we'll make them up as 6 rooms of 6. And I'm just going to let it automatically populate you. So you will have 5 or 6 people per room. And we're going to activate those. And I think Tucker is going to be entering here shortly the question. So I want to go through that very quickly.
I just dropped it into the chat.
Okay, dropped it into the chat. So I'm going to say a little introduction about this. This is a holistic breakout session. You can choose how you want to answer this question. You can talk about your children, you can talk about yourself, you can talk about your students. So spirit uses the mind to create an identity, a self, in order to aid in our, you can say, survival, our success, whatever word you want to put in there. Most people go through life believing that they are the thoughts they are thinking. It's the same thing I mentioned about teachers thinking that the image that they have of themselves came from someone else that modeled it before, instead of the essence that is experiencing those thoughts ourselves. If our conscious experience of life was a cinema, a film, or a video, most of us would be so absorbed in the movie that we would forget who was actually the person sitting in the chair watching the movie. We then have an identity with someone on the screen, think, oh, that person is me, this is where I'm going to go. So it's this subtle shift in awareness from being the movie to watching the movie that we consider. So in our lives, are you playing the role you imagine in the movie of teaching, or in your parenting, whatever, or the identity that is uniquely belonging to you. So that is what you're going to be discussing in your breakout. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes and we're going to come back and see what you said. And I'm opening up the rooms now. Oh, okay. I don't think everybody's back in, but why don't you just share with me some of the things you all talked about? Anyone?
So our whole room is actually back. But we talked about quite a few things. One of the things that we talked about especially is that when we first get into teaching, we do view teaching especially as a role that we have to play because we're not used to being in that place. So some of us talked about how we would change our wardrobes to look more professional, right? But then as you get more used to that and as you get more comfortable with that place, you start to combine the role that you're playing with who you are as a person, and you can feel more authentic and you can share more of your experiences that way. You're muted. I don't know if you know that.
I think of myself as a highly creative person. And so I have a tendency in my wardrobe to buy things that I don't see other people wear. African clothes, Asian clothes. I go the spectrum, and it's about who I am. And almost anyone who knows me would see something and say, oh, that's LaBarbara. That's something she'd wear. I'm looking at Dara, she knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is my cousin over here. But also just your gait when you walk across the campus even. I mean, I walk really fast. And people will see me and they'll say, oh, I know who that is. There are things that really make us unique, and your students pick up on them. And some of them will go on YouTube or somewhere else and talk about you. You know? So it can be humorous at the same time. Tucker and I were having some interesting conversations as well. So I want to hear from some other people. What other things were you all talking about?
Well, LaBarbara, I will tell you that I was remembering, and you reminded me that I need to do meditation. I told the group that I was not doing it, and I had no good reason for not doing so. So I said to them, I need to do meditation in my home before I have a cup of coffee.
Good point. Good
Thank
point.
you.
And we all have habits. I mean, and changing those is not easy all the time, but they may be for a healthy reason that we should change them. Any other conversation or comments that one wants to make? I know this bunch is talkative. I told Tucker that. Don, what were you all saying?
So I got all social psychological and talked about multiple selves and how people change situations to fit them and the situations change the people and that feedback loop and dynamic, and talked about how at this stage of my life, I don't feel like I'm ever inauthentic. You know, I feel like it's at the point where no matter where I am, I get to be me. I just might be a different me. So like I said, you know, my students need Professor Don, not Karate Don. You know, that's not going to be the right match for that. So I think I've done a good job at this point, but I don't know that I always did a good job at this point about kind of realizing that whoever I am, whatever role I'm playing, I'm still me. And I think it's a healthy place. Like I said, I don't know that I've always been there, but it's kind of freeing when you kind of get to the point where you can say no to those things that don't fit you. So, you know, I'm very fortunate that the job that I have, the responsibilities that I have, I do the things I like. That's part of my experience. And the things that I don't like, the things that I'm not well suited for, I'm in a position where I can say, no, there's someone else who can probably do that better than I can. So I think it's really kind of freeing when you kind of realize what your match is and what it isn't. And I don't know if that was exactly the question we're going to talk about, but that's what we talked about.
Well, I will say, when you talk about freeing, that a couple of years ago, I was struggling because I wanted to be creative in a course that I taught, and the course requires for us all to teach it pretty much the same way. And it was difficult at first for me to get used to that, because I'm a big proponent of creativity and wanting to try different things. And I figured out, it took a little bit of brain power, but I figured out that I don't have to be creative at the job in that setting. I can come home and be creative, and I can find that satisfaction there. So I started remodeling my house. You know, I said, oh, I can just have fun changing the person that I am here as opposed to the person that I am there. And then as we got our new building, that spilled over into my office at school. But there is a spot where I limit some of the creativity. Instead of changing what I do in the classroom, I find ways to present it in a creative way. So there are levels and layers of that personality that you're talking about that you can have. I'm looking at our time, and I want to get to the last part of this. So let me go back, and we can certainly have this conversation more after I wrap up. So this won't take very long. So everyone can see that. And I want to move to the wrap up very quickly. So we have the mind, the body, and the spirit. The spirit could be light or whatever you want to manifest it as. But the mind, we want to renew the mind. And sometimes I equate the mind to the computer, because my students understand that language. So sometimes I'll say, hey, you missed that download, didn't you? I don't want to embarrass them and say, oh, you didn't get it. But I'll find another way to say it that we can laugh about and not take it so seriously, as well as when we need to program that software in there, that something's not quite, you're not understanding what I'm asking you to do. The body, we want to maintain a healthy, balanced body. And the spirit, we want to share creative, positive expression. So I want to get to this. And I was telling Tucker about this. So I'm going to share this, this Twitter feed from Dr. Clara Gaw, who's from Africa. And I love what she says, because I think it resonates with us if you're a parent or a teacher in some way. It says, the world doesn't need more people who mindlessly digest whatever information is around. What the world needs are people who learn with purpose, who take action on the things that are important to them, and who seek out high quality information as a way to spark creativity, not as an excuse to consume even more. What type of food are you feeding your brain? You wouldn't want to stuff your body with low quality food. Why cram your mind with low quality thoughts? And I thought that was an interesting thing, because sometimes we can get caught up in how much information we need to share with our students. And sometimes we need to pull back a little bit and think about, is that low quality or high quality material? How much are we asking them to read? How much are we wanting them to try to digest? So here we have the mind, the body, and the spirit in the middle. Here lies the secret to wholeness for you, your family, and your students. So keep your mind sharp, your body strong, and your spirit positive. So it looks like my mind and my internet is having a technical difficulty here, and that I am going to open this up to questions and comments. We're at 1 o'clock. So thank you, if you have to leave, for participating in the first presentation of ITL Professional Development Series. And if you stick around a little longer, you will hear some more of one of my favorite artists, Kiko Mitsai, which is what I was playing at the beginning of this session. I will end with something soothing from her again. So I'll go back to this slide, and if anybody wants to continue the conversation, we might do so.
Before we get to questions, I just want to make sure we all have the opportunity to thank LaBarbara for sharing this wonderful thoughts about mind, body, and spirit today. This has been really good. I think it's what my soul needed today. So I really appreciate that. I also want to put a reminder that next Wednesday we'll be having another professional development event every Wednesday at noon. Next Wednesday will be enthusiasm in teaching, the ultimate renewable. So it's going to be a very kind of thematic extension. Kathy Brockway from a Polytechnic campus is going to be presenting that. So we'll look to see you for next time. But again, any questions or comments to continue the conversation with LB today?
Yeah, you can tell me that's a bunch of BS, LaBarbara. That doesn't bother me. It's whatever you're feeling, and I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see all of you because I thoroughly enjoy seeing your faces. So, any comments? You can rebut me. It's fine. This is experience that I've had for 43 years, and I'm always trying to learn. So, comments.
LaBarbara, I'm going to say I'm not going to rebut anything you said. I'm going to say it's hard, right? It's hard because one of the things that I'm finding is, time is an exhaustible resource. So what happens is taking care of all of the aspects for myself and doing so for my family, for my students, it's hard. So I'm wondering about if you have any kind of advice about how do you get it all in? How do you make time for it? Because, I'm thinking, I heard you and Dr. Carroll talk about meditation. When would I meditate? Where did I fit that into my schedule? Do I got to get up earlier to do that? So I sacrifice the rest to do the meditation. So it's just kind of any insights on that would be really helpful because I want to do all the things, but they all take time.
Well, there's another thing about trying to do all the things. We cannot change all of us ourselves one full swoop. So I'm not a person who likes New Year's resolutions. But I do it in phases. And one of the things that I've discovered is that I was not a person who liked to get up early, truly. But in recent years, my body has made me get up early, not my mind, my body. And though I mentioned that the spirit has that internal clock, so does your iPhone. Okay. You can set it and it'll go off. You can give it peaceful sounds to wake you up. But my father, and this was one that was listed in there, my father used to wake me up with sunlight, or he'd flip on the light in my room. So those things became a part of what wakes me up, which is the spirit side of me that control my sleep. But I've been finding myself at 4:30, 5 o'clock, getting up a lot of times. And this is a person who does not like the news. Okay, well, who likes the news? A lot anyway. But I will read in the morning the news. And I usually go to the comedy shows to read the news. But it starts me laughing. So my rule this year is to laugh every day. That is, I didn't make it a resolution. It just came to me from inside my spirit that I knew I needed to laugh every day. And in laughing every day, I do two things. It renews my spirit, and it also means that I get to tuck my stomach in. So I start to control the body. And I'm always looking for things that have dual meanings or dual opportunities. And so I don't have children. So I recognize all of you who have a family in your homes that you spend time with and should spend time with. But for instance, I have a parrot. I'm not saying that she's like your child, but what I do is I put my workout equipment in front of her cage, and I work out and talk to her at the same time. So I kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. And that way I get it in. She thinks I'm talking to her, but I'm also working out. So I get ways to be, again, creative in the way in which I do things. I'll spend time with her because she's next to my kitchen while I cook. So I'm doing multiple tasks that I know help me. And even when you're sitting down with your child to go through homework, think of it as a way to improve your own memory, and that you're learning something along with her or him. instead of thinking of it as, oh, it's all output and not input for you. And I think that there are a lot of ways that you can. We all need a break. I mentioned that. So take a walk. My favorite thing to do, believe it or not, is I don't like to drive in the winter. When it snows, I'll walk to work. Well, that means, and I mean, it can be knee deep. I'm going to put on all the heavy stuff and I'm going to walk. But just think how much exercise I got in getting to work, and in the meantime, I can think a little bit about what I'm going to do when I get there or how I'm going to get home, just some simple, things, but you can double them up. And you saw in my presentation that multiple tasking is something that really works for the mind. So using multiple things to help you. When I garden, I realize I'm picking up big plants. I have like 6-foot plants and I don't like the little ones. So every time I do move a plant around, I know I'm working on my muscles, and I see that as a way to work out without, going to a gym. I think I told you all that I have 2 rain barrels. They're 65-gallon and 55-gallon. And in the fall, I drain all that water out into buckets, 5-gallon buckets, and I bring it into the garage, move the barrels in, and then pour all that water back in the barrels. I'm getting lots of exercise by doing that. But in the meantime, I've sort of cleared my mind of stuff in the house that I have to do. So I get a break. I get a brain break. So I think, Don, again, I tell you, like I tell everybody, we are creative. It's a problem solver. Just figure it out. I mean, you have the ability. It's just up to you to decide whether you want to use your brain to do it. But if you take the challenge of these things, you will find a creative way that's uniquely yours to do it. And I'm not telling you all to do what I do. I'm just telling you what I do. So I think that, and when we do those things, we can tell our students those things. We can give them examples of ways to multitask that is healthy and good for them. And that's how I use those examples. Okay. Anybody else have a question? And Doris knows. I've been through a whole lot with losing both of my parents, almost, and having to take care of my father in DC. And you do get a little overwhelmed and trying to figure out how you're going to manage all of that. And I've come out of it much stronger and more able to use my mind and my spirit to help my body. That when you understand the intrinsic relationship between them, then you're able to move forward and be successful, I've found. So anyone else have a question or a comment? Because I have another little treat for you when you leave. So anyone?
You gotta say, I'm excited about a treat.
LaBarbara, I want to thank you, and I also want to pass along a greeting from my sister. I put it in the chat, but I know there's a lot of talking going on. So Dion Glasser is my sister. She was a landscape architecture student early 2000, and I let her know you were presenting today, and she wanted me to be sure to say hello to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, indeed. I remember her quite well. And it's good to meet another person in the family. That's the beauty of being at K-State, is that, you may have a student whose sister was with you before. One of my proudest moments is to tell people that Katie Kingery-Page, who is my associate dean, was my student. So, people surpass you. And it's okay. I'm loving it. I'm very proud of where she is and what she's doing. And know that we think alike, that we have this common experience that we had together when she was a student, and we still work together. We still try to collaborate and do other things. And I think that's when we most are rewarded as faculty. When you've been teaching as long as I have, that's one of the ways you can be rewarded, is to reflect back on the people that you've really impacted. So thank you. And do tell her I'm on Facebook. tell her, get in touch.
I absolutely will.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from her. Anyone else? I'd see that we're down to 13 and I really don't want to hold you all, but if you will listen for a moment, I've got a song. It's called Forever, Forever. And it's a little bit more upbeat than the mellowness we got coming into the session. The intent is to always have something that calms the spirit and allows you to focus, as well as, and it doesn't have to be meditation. Some people like that. I wanted to make you clear that mind, body, spirit, I don't talk about chakras. I don't talk about, other ethereal things. I'm talking about the basics of anatomy and how we can use those things that we all possess to be better faculty to our students. So I'm going to leave you with this song. If I can get it to play. Yeah, there it is. I'll turn it down. And that's your reward for sticking with me. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Smile, laugh, and be positive.